Steffi D. Welcome to All Things Cancer. I'm here with my sidekick, Pat Wetzel of Anti-Cancer Club, and my other sidekick, Michael Kovarik. I know all of us are familiar faces to you. We are delighted to have Michael with us as our guest today to talk about his book, Healing Within, My Journey with Breast Cancer. Michael is a dear friend of ours of over a year now, I think, when we were introduced. And so he spent his professional life as an educator and was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2007 and has had an interesting journey, to say the least, and that's an obscene understatement, as you will learn in this next 45 minutes or so. So Michael, thank you first and foremost for being with us.
Thank you for having me on. I love it. I love spending time with you guys.
We're really amped up to talk about this book. So Pat, hi.
Hi there.
Okay, well, let's dive into the book then. What initially prompted you to start writing?
Well, it's fun. It's funny because when I was a teacher, when I was teaching, I had always wanted to write a children's book, and just never got around to it. And then in 2000, like you shared already, in 2007 was my initial diagnosis with stage 1 breast cancer. And I, as I write about in the book, which I've also shared as I've been on the program before, after the first diagnosis, I was very that I was at the time. And going back, I was a very frightened individual. Didn't appear so to people, but very frightened inside, and for a multitude of reasons. And so when I was diagnosed, I first of all had to get over the shock of I never understood that men could get breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And once I kind of got through and worked through that, and then had the the tamoxifen and everything, and the doctor visits now, I was like, at first, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to deal with it. I just want to get through the 5 years, get me to that 5-year mark, and then let me get on with my life. And as the years were progressing, I realized, actually after my second diagnosis in 2010, as I started reading more, around 2000, right before my second diagnosis, I actually started reading books by Louise Hay, Carolyn Mace, and others on healing and the power that we have in dealing with different, in situations. Where I was kind of like an ostrich with its head in the sand, I started realizing that I needed to look at this a different way. And I write about this in my book, where when I got the phone call for the second diagnosis, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 2010, I remember that well, the phone ringing at after 5 o'clock, and my oncologist sharing the news with me. And I remember, sitting at the table and in my head, just, like, how is this possible? I've been on tamoxifen. I've been going to the doctors. I've been doing everything they're telling me to do. How can this happen? And I remember, excuse me, a very powerful moment where I hung up the phone with my oncologist and I sat down in my favorite chair in my living room, and I just fell apart. And our 2 dogs, Polar and Macy, were like right there at my side. And I was just clinging to them, and I was crying. And all of a sudden, I heard my voice. I just spoke out loud. And I said, okay, Michael, you need to go deeper this time. You need to look deeper within. It is not just genetics. It is not just the environment. There's more that's going on that you need to look at. And so I went through some difficult times after the second diagnosis. And and that was 2010, 2011. And in 2012, I went back to work. I had taken a lot of the time off after the second diagnosis. And I went back the following year, and I realized I didn't have the passion for teaching. It just wasn't there. And I realized I needed to make a change. And so I made that decision in 2012 to take an early retirement. And the thought of writing was coming, and I was starting to write about my experiences myself. And I remembered how I had always wanted to write a book. And like I explained, it always was going to be a children's book. And I realized as a male going through breast cancer, how powerful it would be to share my journey with people, my perspective, how it affected me, and to get the word out that men get breast cancer. And so in November, I remember, well, I was actually helping a friend of mine after I retired. A friend of mine helped him on his farm making goat cheese. And I was working a couple of farmers markets for him, helping him out. And that ended in October, and November 1st of 2012, I just sat down in this room and I just started writing. I had no idea what I was going to write. I didn't have, like
a 5-point outline?
Yes, I didn't have like a 50-page outline of what I was going to be doing. And it just came, and I just wrote. I had ideas. I had different topics that I wanted to talk about. And it just came. And so I would write every day. And the neat thing was, some days it would be like an hour. Some days it would be 3 hours. But I seemed to know when I needed to stop. And I think it was just because I also wanted this to be a very comfortable and a very enjoyable experience. And so that's kind of how it got me there. And then I wrote from November.
I think I was going to ask, that's a great winter activity. But one of the things, one of my observations as I read through the book, and I'm sure, of course, I'm looking through lenses as a person who is a friend of yours, reading. Is that Princess Chanel?
Yes, it is. She's becoming a bit of a video hog.
Okay. We maybe need to give her some screen time.
Yeah, really.
So she has her
I think so.
But one of the things that is just such a perfect reflection of you, it really felt like I got to know you even better as I was reading. But it really gives, I can feel you going deeper. Just as you described just a few moments ago, saying to yourself, with your second diagnosis, this was a wake-up call. It's not just genetics. It's not just environment. There is something deeper and within that you needed to look at. And I think one of the many compelling things throughout the book is how you opened yourself up and allowed yourself. That in and of itself is a frightening thing, to say, I need to dig deeper. There's something here. I know there's something here. And where do I go and how do I do that?
Yeah.
Talk to us, because you have such a holistic approach. You recognize that there's a difference between what traditional medicine has to offer and what healing is. So can you share with us your journey across the holistic spectrum, I guess? I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah. And that is so mind-boggling to me, because, knowing who I was even prior to my first diagnosis, and if you had asked me, 10 years prior to that, would you be doing Reiki? Would you be seeing a psychic? Would you be, going to doing energy work? I would have been like, there's no way I would be doing things like that. And so I think, what has been so magical for me in this journey, which I hope people get when they do read the book, is how I think once I opened myself up and, once I allowed myself to realize that there were other things, and one of the first things that started it was when Tim and I bought this farmhouse and we moved to Greenwich, New York, a very agricultural area in Washington County of New York, upstate. It's about an hour north of Albany. And I was commuting down to Albany for my teaching job. But my neighbor that we got to know was telling me how there was this yoga studio in Greenwich. And I had always wanted to do yoga, but never got the courage, never mustered up the courage to do it. And I just went, okay, now this is, I had still had, this was prior to my second diagnosis. This was like 2009. And I started going to yoga and I just connected with it. And one of the individuals in the story, in my yoga class was this woman, Maud. And as we started talking, she was sharing with me about how she was a Reiki master. And I'm like, I had no idea what that was. And I had been, more and more reading more of Carolyn Mace, more of Louise Hay, more Wayne Dyer. I was, expanding my reading and just connecting with it. And so when Maud and I were talking, and again, when she was talking to me about, if I was ever open to a session, and my initial reaction is like, oh dear God, I don't know anything about that. Where am I going, do I want to get into that? But it was Maud's connection. And and I think you'll find out, because I know I've talked with you, but I'd love to have, and when I realized that Maud was this gentle spirit, and I had this ultimate trust with her, I was like, let's try this. And so she came to the house and she did a Reiki session, and I was really blown away with it, in the sense of the very first time. There were times when she was like, she wasn't even touching me, but she would run her hands through different parts of the body. And there were times where I didn't sense anything, and other times I could just feel this heat coming from her hands. And I remember sitting there going, this is magical. This is amazing. And you need to open yourself up to this and more of things like this. And, I write about in the book how I started doing Reiki with Maud I want to say that September of 2010. And it was during a session in late October where she was doing Reiki, and she had me flip over to my stomach, which normally I don't do, but I had such trust in her, I didn't question anything. And she was just doing Reiki. Next thing I know, she was actually massaging the left side of my back. And I thought nothing of it because I trusted her. And, at the end of the session, we always have this time where she talks to me about what I felt, and what she felt. And we have this phenomenal conversation. And the first thing she said to me, she was like, Michael, I have to apologize. She goes, I normally never do something like that with people. She goes, but I just got this intuitive sense that there was something there that needed to be broken up. And I remember sitting there, and we were talking, and she goes and she knew that I went through breast cancer, and I realized I had never told her which side. So I said, it was my left side. So we were thinking it was scar tissue. 2 weeks later, I met my oncologist. She doesn't like something in my scar, sends me for the ultrasound, which then becomes the biopsy, which then becomes my second diagnosis.
Wow.
And I was like, this is powerful. This is very, very powerful. And at that point, afterwards, I was put on a more intense drug. and I was having a lot of severe side effects with it. And my oncologist at the time, my first oncologist, had retired. And I was now with a new oncologist. And the wonderful thing that I learned from my second oncologist is how important a relationship is. And an extremely intelligent doctor, but there was no connection. And even when Tim would always come with me to my appointments, and even he was sensing, like, when he would ask questions, she would be like, she wouldn't say anything, but there was this look of like, that, like, why are you doing that? And as I started sharing about my side effects and how they were very debilitating in a sense, a lot of ways, it came to a place where she had said, I'm not stopping the drug. And that was when I had said to myself, in my head, I heard this voice that just said, that's not your decision. That's my decision. And, during this time, I would say to Tim, I can't keep taking this drug. It's destroying my life. And one day he said to me, he goes, Michael, that really scares me, because what else are we going to do? And I remember I sat there across from him from the table, and I felt like I hit this brick wall. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I have no idea what to do. Do I have the courage to stop this drug and do something else? I don't know how, what to do beyond that.
Hey, Michael, not to interrupt, but that's also the point in your book where you had a realization that this was the impact that this was having on Tim.
Yeah. It was at that moment.
That moment.
It was that moment when he said to me, what are we going to do? And I remember sitting there and I went, oh my God, this is not just my journey. This is also his.
Which is a huge point.
Oh
and
my
I know,
God.
Pat, you would agree. It happens to us, but it affects everyone else around us. And I think sometimes we have blinders on.
Well, and I think you need that. Go ahead, Pat.
Oh, no, I find it so interesting. We had Bava Ram on Cancer
Sunday.
Club this past month, and he had a very similar moment where all of a sudden he realized that everything that he was going through had massive ramifications for his wife. And it was the first time that he kind of grokked this. It was an aha moment, and it was paradigm changing.
It is, because it's not just you.
Yeah.
And it's very easy, which I think all of us know, when you get that diagnosis, your whole vision at that point is, how do I deal with this? How do I, in a sense, get rid of this? How do I live through this?
You sink on the fear and the wanting to control things.
Yes.
That end of the spectrum. And the evolution that comes across in your book, and I think the evolution that those of us who have lived with cancer for a long period of time are experiencing, is that you have to evolve from that point of fear to a point, as you're saying, of being more open, of letting go, of some trusting. And if you look at Louise Hay and her writing, you're really moving from fear to love.
Well, and gratitude.
Yeah.
Gratitude.
Yes.
The
gratitude.
Gratitude
was a very, yeah. I'm sorry. Gratitude was a very big enlightenment to me. And so, at that point, and what I had been learning in my reading, and what I was really focusing on trying to do was trusting that the answers were going to come. When I looked back and I thought, here, a chance conversation with a neighbor, I find out about a yoga studio. I go to the yoga class, I meet Maud, who introduces me to Reiki, which is which I'm still doing. Actually, she's coming Monday to do a session before I go to Dana-Farber. And so I had to trust. And one of the neat things that came of that, as I was then trying to look at, okay, where do I go from here? How do I deal with this when I have a doctor who is very adamant that they're not stopping the drug. And, you know, the first thing she said to me, and I gave her so much credit, when, you know, the second diagnosis came, she had said to me, you know, Michael, we don't know what to do with men who have been on tamoxifen and the cancer comes back. And I remember sitting in her office going, I appreciate your honesty. In my head, I'm thinking, but why the heck do you not know what to do?
Yeah.
You know? And so you're kind of in this place of, I have no idea where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the trust where I started trusting, you know, as I started trusting my faith in Maud and in myself to heal. You know, things happen. And, you know, as I was explaining, we're in this very rural area. And we were up at some friend's house that I think that it was like that February, where I was still struggling with the new drug. I had been on it for a couple of months. I was still very adamant about trying to figure out what to do. And we're at this party in the middle of the woods at our friend Robin Peters' house. And it's just filled with people. And this woman that I write about with so much love in my book, Faylee, who is my guardian angel here on earth. She's like a carbon copy of my German grandmother with the accent. Yes, with the accent, with the cooking, and the love that she gives out. And, you know, she would call me because I was also going through radiation at the time. And she would call me periodically to see how I was doing. And she would go, Michael, every morning at 7 a.m, I light a candle because I know you're getting radiation. And I'm like, how grateful to have people like that in your life. And so we were at this party and Faylee comes up to me and she goes, Michael, you need to go over there and talk to that man, John. He's an energy doctor. And I'm like, I will do anything you tell me to do, Faylee.
I will
And so I go,
bridge.
yes. And so I go over and there's this, I mean, you know, it's like what we talked about. It's like you connect with these people. You know, like when I connected with Maud, there was this instant connection. You just sense this wonderful spirit. And when I connected with John, there was this wonderful, warm connection. And he is a GP in Bennington, Vermont, but also had been studying what I call energy work. And I forget the name. And I think I don't know if I used the name in the book, and we started talking, and I was talking to him about my struggles and what I was dealing with. You know, and then I'm also sitting there thinking, okay, I'm in Hebron, New York, this little dinky town in Washington County. And here I am crossing paths with a GP from Vermont who's also an energy doctor. And I'm thinking, how does that happen?
Because you were,
you know, how does yes, yeah, that's it, Pat. And I think that was one of the most powerful gifts I received after the second diagnosis, was really getting to that place of being open to it.
And you can't manufacture or you can't force yourself to that point that you're open.
Yeah.
You know, and yet that's such a desire that I know we all have for certain people in our lives who can't open up to things that would be to their benefit. But yeah, I mean, I'm with Pat. I'm just amazed at the unfolding of your person throughout this book, and how we were able to observe that and also appreciate the elements that completely transcend your story, and apply to many of us who have gone through, you know, like circumstance and like transformations.
Well, I think the thing that comes out that I find so interesting, and it's something I would say to everybody, you know, read this book, but hear this part of the story. It is a story that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's an evolution, and it becomes an ongoing journey. And
it's work.
It is work.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you're so right, Pat. And I think especially in our culture, we want, and I think especially if you're facing a cancer diagnosis, it's like you want answers right now. And I think part of, for me, the lesson, which was very, very difficult to learn, was trusting that it will come when you're open to it and you allow it. I could have, hearing that my oncologist was not going to stop the drug, I could have frantically run around trying to find people. And that's when it doesn't happen. Or you connect them with maybe not the best choice of path to take because you're so desperate. And I think I had to face the fear. I mean, all my life, fear was my partner. I gave so much power to fear. And that's how, I ran it. I mean, as a teacher, I was constantly terrified that somebody was going to find out I was gay and then take away my teaching, which I loved. What are other people going to think? So you build this on there. And it was through my readings where I started having to connect with my own truth and my own self. And that's a journey that takes time. And that's
and patience.
Healing and patience. And, part of that is being grateful for where you are, grateful for all the things that are happening, because they are there that you're building on to become. And, when I share with people my journey, for me, one of the most amazing things has been who I now see who I am compared to who I was. And I'm amazed and so grateful for that. And it is something that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And like you said, Steph, it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of times going to those dark, dark places within us that scare us. And I was finally realizing I had the courage within me to go to those dark, dark places, because I knew that was the only way that I was going to heal.
But once you go through those experiences and you kind of transcend those fears or those thoughts that you have, you're starting to form almost a methodology of getting through it. It's not clean and it's not linear, but you're realizing that you have the skill to move through whatever you have to move through.
Yeah, I think one of the most wonderful gifts I got was realizing the strength that each of us, but I was noticing within myself that I actually had the strength within me to face this, to be with it, to learn from it, to grow with it, to heal with it, which I never, ever in my life thought I had. And that was the unfolding. That was one of the unfolding things that was coming from this.
Well, I think moving from an external orientation to that more internal orientation is an endlessly fascinating journey.
Yeah.
It is. And what you discover about yourself is it's so enlightening, and it's so empowering, because you realize there's so much good, there's so much love within you that some of us, and I'm talking myself, that I never allowed myself to see for a long time.
It was interesting. I went back through some photos recently, and I've always been camera shy, and I was stunned when I went back. I was like, oh my God, these are beautiful pictures of me. How could I have thought that I was so awful looking or didn't want to have my picture taken or whatever? It was absolutely a revelation. And it makes you stop and wonder, what else have I missed, done, misperceived? It really makes you stop dead in your tracks.
Yeah. It is amazing. It's amazing what unfurls from this when we're open to it.
I've been doing some research.
Which is really not a very nice path to be going down.
It may not be a nice path to be going down, but I'll take this path over a path of being unaware.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that was very good. I
That's a
love
deep
that.
thought.
Yes.
I've been doing some research lately. I'll share it with you later, on native healing in Hawaii.
Mm.
And it interests me for a number of reasons, but it goes to a lot of what we've been talking about. And I think you'd find the same thing in a lot of cultures around the world outside of this Western medical culture. And it goes to things like touch, personal connection, energy, energy as it would relate to the food we eat and things like that. All these very ancient, really, approaches to health. And I personally think there's an enormous amount of wisdom in all that.
Mm.
And
Yeah, and I think also one of the things that really came to me because energy is such an important now part of me, where I am so in tuned when I meet somebody, the energy that I'm feeling. When I go into a building or different places, I'm so much more attuned to the energy and how it's affecting me. But what I also, and even in talking to other people going through their own paths with cancer, was how they realized that you really had to start empowering yourself to remove those individuals who drain your energy.
I've gotten
Which
very,
I
very
never,
absolute about that. Yeah.
yeah,
And
and I
sometimes you don't pick
never
up on it
allowed
right
it.
away. Yeah, and it comes up later.
Yes,
And you have to just say, this can't be part of my life.
yeah, and it's a difficult thing, and I know, like for me, there were friendships that I actually had to distance myself from, because it was like the smoke screen that was there was now gone, and I was truly seeing how it was affecting me. And I had to make that decision that this isn't something I need in my life. I think, I think so many people going through cancer or any kind of disease will sit there and say, it empowers you to finally put yourself first.
yeah.
It empowers you to put yourself at the head of the line.
And to look within and look for what is right for you. One of the things that
Yeah.
I found interesting, both David Servan-Schreiber in his book, Anti-Cancer, and Paul Calinthi in, what was the name of his?
When breath becomes
When
air.
Breath Becomes Air.
Mm.
Both of them, I think, made a statement at some point saying that the cancer gave them an opportunity to step back from the super competitive world they've been in. And I've had that same experience of, it has given me a reason to say, I'm not going to do that. And we shouldn't wait till we have cancer to look at our lives and make those decisions.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It shouldn't take cancer. But the reality is, none of us get, it doesn't seem at least, that any of us get to that point. There has to be a shock of some sort to get our attention, to get us to wake up and really check our whole persons into the game,
And even if you sense you're not totally in the game, you often can't spur yourself forward. Something has to happen that makes you go, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, and sadly, cancer is one of those things, and likely to be one of those things for the majority of people in their lifetime.
Yeah, I would agree.
One of the things that, as I was reading through your book, because I like to write words, so of course you guys know me. So anyway, the words. I mean, these words. Okay, so we start off and you're trapped. Trapped is your first word. Trapped by fear.
Yeah.
And then we see you move into a space of gratitude and become kind of the shackles start to loosen a little bit. And you speak to being empowered. I mean, the empowerment that was reflected in your conversation with the oncologist who did not want to discontinue the medication. And and then on to inner peace as being a common thread through that. And what was the and then ultimately healing. And so as I, keep your book organized in my head, I just commend you for the way that you wrote it. Whether it was intentional or not, it came out the way it was intended to come out.
And I think that's such a huge, that is of such huge value in this book, because I think that if we choose to start looking within, it's a journey we all go on in our own way. And for somebody to be able to see your evolution is incredibly heartening, because as you're going through this journey, you have no idea what's coming up next. You have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea how your cancer is going to behave. You don't know. And there is that massive element of trust just moving forward. And I think by hearing stories of other people who have been through this and how they've managed to move through the fear and the difficulty, it really helps create a path for others. And I think it helps encourage others to be daring enough to go down that path.
Well, and even to give them the sparkle of hope that it's a possibility.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, in such a big way. And one of the things that I wanted to share with everyone who's going to watch this, Michael, I often say to him when we're talking that it's my observation and my belief that when he received his metastatic diagnosis, that he actually is at like his highest level of wellness now than he ever was before. And he just, there is a radiance about him that is a result of this process that he has gone through and so beautifully written. And so if you haven't read the book, shame on you. You should read this book. Excuse me. All that to say thank you for writing, and thank you for using that gift to the benefit of others. You were extremely transparent in your book, and that's hard to do. It's hard to be raw and be in those places again.
Your book actually got me to finally read Louise Hay. I hadn't read, I had come across the name, but I never read her until I read your book. And I love the way she opens her book with, I am willing to change. This mantra, I am willing to change.
Willing to change.
It's so profound.
And it's powerful. It's so powerful. And I think, it's funny because I think if anybody who, if you talk to friends of mine that I grew up with, are amazed, first of all, that I would have been as open as I was writing, because I'm a very private person, or used to be a very private person. And it was amazing to me as I was writing, and I realized I was just coming from my heart, and I just trusted the process. And, that was from a couple of friends of mine. Even my brother, when he read the book, said to me, he goes, I had no idea of all the stuff you were going through. And, nobody did, because I wasn't somebody to share all of that. And so to sit down and write about it was such a healing process for me, because it allowed me to speak my truth. Mm-hmm. It allowed me to be my true self. And, as I have said in conversations with you guys, going through that and writing this book, I think really has helped me to be who I am right now, especially after, receiving in September of 2015, the metastatic diagnosis. And where I was like, okay, all right, what do we need to do? I'm trusting that there's a reason for this path. There, why things are happening. And I look at the wonderful things that have happened within this past year, like even my time with you guys and writing, You know, even though I've gone through like about a year of a writer's block, I had to really sit and trust that it was going to unblock, and it was going to come when that was one of the things I've learned from this. But I think it prepared me. I was in such a stronger place, you know, when I heard the words, you know, Michael, you're considered stage 4. And you hear those words, and the first word that comes in your head is death, because of what we all know about stage 4. And, you know, it was ironic. It was like Tim, who's always been the one that's always asking the questions. And he was just kind of sitting there, and I was like, okay, so what do we do? And, you know, I think like what you shared, Stephanie, which thank you so much for sharing that about, I am at a place, you know, where I am more alive now, I think, than I've ever been in my life. Because of that, you know, that boundary that metastatic puts on you. And, you know, we've lost a good friend who had prostate cancer, and it had spread. And I was with him, you know, the last few days, for the last few months of his time, but especially with the last few days of his time. And I had to face my own fears, you know, sitting next to him and thinking, oh my God, is this going to be me? And the old Michael would have just fallen apart. I probably would have never even had the courage to sit next to him and be with him. And when I was with him, I was grateful for the gift that he was giving me, of allowing me to go back inside and get the strength and go, everyone's path is different. You know, right now, you are okay, and you are here with him. And that was such an amazing place to be. And it was having gone through all of that. And I think also being strong enough to open up and share what I was going through in the book at that time, prior to my metastatic diagnosis, allowed me to be where I am right now in dealing with this, of living with it, not dying from it.
Ah, yes.
What is your next book going to be about?
My friend Tracy, who's a psychic, I went to her a couple of months ago, and I write about her in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And which again was another thing I never ever thought I would have done. And I love it now because of my connection with her. But when I was with her the last time, and I had a picture of Bill, and she had connected me with Bill and writing, and she was like, he's here to help you write. And I've been, you know, as you guys know, I've been struggling with this writer's block for quite some time, and just trying to be very patient with it. And spending my time with Bill, I've been thinking like, I kept thinking like I couldn't write anything until I cured myself from metastatic breast cancer. And during that time, I realized I think it's really going to be about my time with Bill and the lessons that I received from him. You know, our parallel lives at stage 4. You know, I had the opportunity to say to him, you know, at one point, how grateful I was that he was on this journey with me. And, you know, all of the things I learned from him. You know, he would call me up, and he'd be in these horrendous places, and he'd be talking to me, and we talk. He was my cancer. We were each other's cancer confidant. And he would say to me, you know, Michael, he goes, you're handling this so well. And I said, you know what, Bill, if you had called me 3:00 yesterday afternoon, I was falling apart on the couch. I was sobbing. I was cursing God. I was doing all of those things. And I said, the difference is I allow myself to experience that, and then I work myself through it. And each time that we talked, and I would share things with him, and he'd be like, you know, Michael, thank you so much. You helped me so much. And I said, you know what? This helps me, because it reminds me of how to approach this, when I share with him. And so I really have just been kind of sitting, and I think more and more I'm getting a feeling that that's where I think the next book is coming from, is the parallel lives that we had at stage 4, and how different they were, yet how the same they were, and what we gave to each other, and I think it's going to start with a piece that I want to write for just in his 1-year anniversary in August. And then I think I have a trusting feeling that from there it's going to unfold, that next book.
Mm.
Well, we will be waiting for that book.
Early galleys.
That's right, exactly. So thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your life and your heart through your book. The book, again, is Healing Within: My Journey with Breast Cancer by Michael Kovarik. So you can get it on Amazon. You can go through the ACC website. I believe it's up in the marketplace, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
I think you can also, order it at your favorite independent bookstore.
Correct.
Also, I remember sitting up here, and I remember the day the UPS truck pulled up with the boxes from Balboa. I mean, I self-published this book, but it was through Balboa. And I remember them coming and looking and holding in my hand that book and thinking, oh my God, I did it. I actually did it. And friends of mine had said to me, Michael, so many people talk about writing a book, and you actually did it. And it was such a healing, oh my God, such a healing space to be, looking at that. And no matter where it goes and what it does, if it touches one person, that's it. I think it was what I received from it in opening myself up and trusting that process. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to share about it.
It's such a wonderful book. It's just amazing on so many levels. I can't wait for the next one.
So get busy, here.
Yes, it's coming. It's coming.
Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Steph. And I think the world of you too. And I thank you for welcoming me into the Anti-Cancer Club family, and especially on all things cancer. It has been such a remarkable part of my journey. And I thank you for that.
Wow.
Which will come out in the next book about my journey in Anti-Cancer Club.
Yeah.
All right. See you, Michael.
All right. You guys take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.